Hello! Welcome to GameGuru Classic and GameGuru Max, broadcast number 144, and a very warm welcome to those who are joining us live via the live chat. Our broadcasts are normally divided into two sections, the second of which is a Q&A, where I get to answer some questions, but I need to know what them questions are. And the format is the live chatters chat away, asking questions. Stick a question mark at the end, please, and then we can scroll through them later on in the Q&A. Answer as many as we can during the broadcast, and I apologise in advance to those who ask questions late and don't get an answer because I'm about to end the broadcast. So that's forewarned. So without further ado, we'll go into the first part of the broadcast, which is to demonstrate anything that needs demonstrating. This week's a little bit weird and different, but we'll just go through the motions on the first part. No news on changes to the GameGuru Classic repository. When there is, I'll be happy to report and drill into some details. But for now, I did the courtesy of looking at the Steam page for GameGuru Classic just to see what was on offer. As you can see, there's 4 DLCs currently at 60%. So if those are the DLCs for Classic and you're a Classic user and you don't have them, just a heads up that those are now on a discount. And as always with our GameGuru DLCs, extremely high value, you're at full price, so knocking 60% off them, extra seriously high value purchases for that content. And it's all game ready content that just drops straight into your level and you can start making games with them right away. But I know many of you are waiting for the GameGuru Max news, because how do I know that? Well, most of the questions from previous broadcasts are all centered around GameGuru Max, which is fair enough, because that's the hot and coming game maker that everyone's going to be using in years and years to come. So what have we been doing in the last 7 days? Anyone who's been looking at the issues board, like daily, religiously, will have noticed there's been a slowdown in the number of bug fixes, and I'll tell you for whys. On Friday, that's the Friday just gone, we got down to 3 bugs left. In the high priority GameGuru Max issues, we'd fixed them all bar 3. One of them is the dreaded AMD black screen, which we still haven't been able to figure out why it's happening on that 1 or 2 users' machines, but we're still working at it, trying to figure out if we can reproduce it or trick the offending PC system into revealing why this little quirk is happening. So it's okay for everybody else. On the majority of graphics cards, it's just this particular driver and this particular hardware on AMD, and it's not rendering the graphics, which is not really useful if you're trying to make a game. And then the other 2 is related to VR, which work continues on VR. In fact, after this broadcast, there will be further tweaks to the VR offering before we release version 1, so that should please people who've got their headset standing ready and they want to start making VR games. So there will be work on that. But the biggest reason why you haven't got a lot of bug fixes isn't just the fact there was only 3 at the time. You'll be happy to hear that our community have been very active and that it's not 3 anymore. That number's gone up to 14 as new issues have been fixed. They've been weighted. They are highs. So we've got a lot of fixes to do in the next couple of days. And in the meantime, what we've been doing is working on what we call collateral. That's the not necessarily code or fixing bugs. It's all of the material you need to assemble before you can release a product. And one of the things that we noticed is all of the built-in tutorials needed updating, and especially the intro, the official trailer for GameGuru Max still had early access written all over it. And so that has been an ongoing process, removing the early access logos, early access text from all of the various screens and text within the software and text on the website. You get the idea. And I'm pleased to report that process is pretty much finished now. We've got our official trailer, we've got the getting started updated, and all of the tutorials. But before I just show you that, I just want a quick rehash on the bugs. As you can see, these are the 14 I've mentioned, and I think 6 of them came in the last 24 hours. Just to give you an idea that it's all very doable. These are not going to get in our way in terms of releasing a product, and a lot of them are very low-hanging fruit. Just little omissions, little bits of script that didn't quite make it to 100% stability, and we're just going to sort them out and get this back down to either 0 or back to 3, where we was on Friday. So let me show you what we've been doing. Anyone familiar with the GameGuru Max Hub will know that you've got all your demo games in the first tab. I know this looks like this one screen here is like the odd one out, but if you hadn't bought the Aztec Game Kit DLC, then that wouldn't be there, and we'll get a nice grid of 3 across by however many down, and it's very nice for an out-of-the-box experience when you're browsing your demos. 18 game demos in total, and again, thank you very much to the community members who made these games and allowed us to put it in the official software, so very much thank you for that. But this is the bit I've been working on, which is updating all of the videos to remove the logos and making sure that the screens and the advice in those videos are still relevant and are still applicable to the latest version. Some of these videos were created 12 months ago and the software's changed since. So the things at the top you're probably familiar with. Further down, maybe you haven't seen the object grouping or the animation library videos. Those were relatively recent additions, but the last 3, Behavior AI, Behavior Demonstrations Part 1 and Behavior Demonstrations Part 2. This is one that has been created very recently because someone reminded me in a previous broadcast that I promised to do a video on AI. So a video on AI has been done. And just to prove it, because it's finished, I will play it here just to eat up the clock a little bit. Even though we actually are comfortably 9 minutes. At least 9 minutes into the clock, probably 6 minutes into actual broadcast. So let's check that out. In this tutorial, we will show you how to add simple logic to your level. We will start with door and key logic by placing down a door and a large key. By default, the door is unlocked, so we will toggle the state so a key is required. You can associate a key with the door by entering the visual logic system and dragging a connection between them. Let's test to see that this works. Now we will add a trigger zone beyond the door to spawn some zombies. Find and add a zombie to your level, but set it so it does not show at the start of the level. If you copy an object from the level, it will retain all settings of that object. Now once again, use the visual logic system to associate the zone with the zombies. When we test the level again, once the player enters the door, the zombies will attack. Feel free to browse the hundreds of available behaviors to craft the logic for your games. No scripting required. Okay, so I wanted to show that because I want some feedback. We had to start somewhere with AI, and there's a lot of meat on the AI bone, basically. But in order to get into the advanced stuff and the interesting and sophisticated stuff, you have to start somewhere, and you have to start there right at the beginning. So over the last 12 months, a lot of people ask about key and door, and a lot of other people have asked about how you can trigger things in your game. And this video tutorial covers both of those things within 2 minutes. So it's a nice, easy demonstration of not only what you can do, but which buttons you press and which order you press them in order to create that. Now I want to know, this is the feedback I want, how much further do we need to go in terms of doing tutorials for AI? Doesn't have to be super exhaustive. In fact, it's not going to be. That'll just happen naturally as we produce content in the months and months to come. But for the official software, is there a big glaring omission in being able to do game logic and AI within your levels? And if we haven't covered it, I'd like to cover it, because AI is one of the things you run into almost right away after you've laid out your level and it looks nice and pretty and everything's where you want it. Unless you kind of know how to apply all the game logic, it's just a pretty scene that you run around. You want a game to be a game, and for a game to be a game, it has to have mechanics. Okay, so that's what we've been working on, and we're quite happy about that. There's a few more bits and pieces. I think there's a few logos still floating around the Steam product page, which needs to have EA removed. Also, if you spot any early access logo or early access text floating around our website, on Steam, anything in the software, absolutely let me know, because otherwise it'll sneak into the final product. We don't want that. And that's kind of one of the things that we have to work on now before we go on and we do any sort of like more screenshots or more material for what we call our collateral. And I'd rather have all the EA stuff struck out for our version 1 product. So that's what we've been working on. What's happening next, as I've already hinted at, is more work on the VR. So we just get the VR a little further along, some of you have tried to export a standalone for VR and it didn't work. Yeah, so that's going to be fixed. Also, the interface configuration as well for VR and smoothing out some of the rough edges. Won't be an absolute all-encompassing, does everything all singing, all dancing VR offering, but it will allow you, if you've got a VR headset, some VR hardware, to be able to play your non-VR experience in the VR world, which is already pretty cool. I remember the first time I ran a VR in an early, I think it was GameGuru Classic Proto, and it blew my mind just to be able to see a level that forever I've seen on a monitor suddenly in 3D, and I can look around a wall or a pillar. It was really cool. Okay, and finally, one thing that you've not seen is going in the next 7 days is 30 more behaviours. I've been keeping them back whilst bugs have been fixed and all the other stuff, as you've seen here, all important to release a product. And we could have released it without these additional 30 behaviours, and we could have just released them afterwards. But we're getting to the point now where it just feels right that we can take these behaviours and add them to the library. So maybe next week I get to reveal what some of those behaviours are. But if you're lucky enough to have found the experimental build on Steam, just keep having Steam auto update you, and one day you'll go into the behaviours library and suddenly see a host of new behaviours. So yeah, keep your eye out for that one. So without further ado, let's swiftly move on to the live chat and see if there's any questions in our Q&A. Okay, we have a live chat window somewhere. Hopefully with lots of lovely questions. Found it. Okay. In fact, let's just have a nice backdrop for that. Yes, there you go. Looks nice on YouTube if you've got some lovely eye candy. So let's scroll to the top and we'll answer some questions. Exclamation mark, question mark at the start. This is from Kirk's protege. Can you add an option so the saved standalone can have the Steam integration in it? We need Steam achievements for trophy hunters. There are no plans to add Steam integration, Steam achievements in version 1 of GameGuru Max. Although we have done the outline plan for Steam achievements, but I don't think it's the one new thing. The first Steam achievements that gets implemented is Steam achievements for using GameGuru Max. So we'll have a set of achievements that make your first level, export your first game, your first level that has more than 10 characters in it. Little achievements like that, just to sort of give you some ranking in using the product. But I think I know the actual root of your question, which is you want to take full advantage of the Steam API in the games you export as a standalone game that you then subsequently sell. That's going to be a big job, and it's not going to be part of version 1. So if that's a deal breaker for you, great question to ask, just so you know what you're going to get when we release GameGuru Max. Right, next question is, looks like it's a bit further down, but I do spot a question mark. This is from Peck. Good evening, Lee. You got it right. It is definitely evening here in Wales. I have a question, a very important one. Have you, besides working on TGC products, taken good care of yourself? Yes, actually. I gave myself the time, and it's not always easy, to do a thorough testing and debug phase for GameGuru Max before release. Very often you kind of run around like a headless chicken trying to get stuff out and you're never quite happy with it. Well, you know, I've added that breathing room so we could do a proper job, and if you've got the time to do a proper job, the work is enjoyable. And so if I'm enjoying myself, then I am taking care of myself. If you're happy, you're in good health. So yes, I have. Long answer to a great question. Next question is two doors down. This is from Synchro62. And it was a question from Discord, which is a social vertical that we have a channel on. Could assets buildings be disabled from the Navmesh if no AI is required in the buildings, and if it would make any difference to the loading and running of Max? The generation of the Navmesh is practically instantaneous. So I don't think removing buildings from that would make any difference. But I know what you mean. If there's sort of and the way the Navmesh works right now, it's using the tile system. So it has these tiles across the whole area of your level, and you can exclude certain tiles from even bothering to generate a Navmesh. So maybe we could have it so you'd specify which tiles you want Navmeshes for, so the Navmesh has a subset of calculations to produce the Navmesh on, and then just ignore the rest. But the idea of just having certain objects that you can say, I don't want a Navmesh here, you'd have to do it like per object, and whether there's an object in the building and that object needed a Navmesh, then obviously you'd still have to calculate the Navmesh for the building. You get the idea. So I suppose the root cause of that question and the answer you want is, if we could switch certain things off, could you speed up the Navmesh calculation? Well, the Navmesh calculation is pretty quick. So if that's the only reason, then I don't think it's reason enough to add a lot of extra options that'll confuse the end user. But do let me know if I'm completely wrong on your Navmesh calculation procedure. And you'll find that out if you tick the developer options mode and then do a test level. There's a little prompt in text which tells you when you're in the Navmesh generation stage, and let me know how long it's taking for your massive level. Okay, question is from further down from Tom. Are you aware that most of the demo games need updating due to updates on Max? Most have moved entities, behaviours not working. Yes. Only today when I was producing some video for the official trailer, the table in the trapped level is gone. So all the objects like the gun and the note are just floating in mid-air. So yeah, going to go through all of the demos, making sure that... the reason objects disappeared, and it was something that's been put off but was absolutely needed, is we removed the showcase folder. Because that showcase folder contained a lot of duplicated entities. You'd have the same object in 2 places in your file structure, which was crazy. So in removing the showcase... for the most part, the demos have been updated. That was part of the process. We didn't just ignore the demos. That work was done. But I think certain things had been missed. And we're going to have to go back and make sure that is corrected. Even if we have to go back to the old level and then redo a little internal thing that we do, which allows us to replace a reference. So if an object's been deleted, there's a system inside GameGuru Max when we can point it to its new location in the library. And so you don't lose its position in the level. But yeah, do make an issue of that, because if there's one, there's probably more than one. And I'd like, if possible, for users just to point exactly where that missing object is, and so we can put it back. So yeah, and there's another thing related to levels as well. I think it's creating an empty or a garbage text file when you load in a level, because it thinks there's an asset missing when in fact there isn't. So it's probably related to that in some strange way. Okay, question beneath. This is another one from Tom. When VR controllers, will we at least have the option to change the layout? Like we can change the keyboard setup by actually changing a file. Yes. When I mentioned VR configuration, that's what I meant. The idea that when I say this button does that, you might not want that for your VR game. You want to remap it to something else. And so that remapping work is being done so you have that capability. It currently doesn't exist in the latest EXP build, and I want it to. So that's one of the things that I'm adding onto my personal VR plate to make sure it's in version 1. Not a huge job, and there are some additional buttons that we want to add in. Like right now, I don't think you can climb a ladder or jump, and you're really going to be able to do those, I think, in VR. So it's all part of that same work, adding some missing functionality in terms of what the player can do, and allowing those button presses on the VR controllers to be configurable. As to how it's configurable, you'll wait and see, and we'll see how much time is available to go to town on that one. Right, H. Ridgway asks, why haven't there been any new characters since Aztec? Fantasy and cyberpunk themes are nice to have, so why not include a few characters? Need fantasy special. There are no plans to add any more characters into GameGuru Max version 1. All future art that gets created will be done by third-party artists at their discretion. We will test them, we will make sure they work great, out of the box, drop right into GameGuru Max and do what they need to do. So that'll be our responsibility. But it's up to the third-party artists who want to create additional characters enough to make a DLC out of, and then if we're lucky enough, we get offered that DLC and we'll sell them as an official GameGuru Max DLC. You may also find that characters appear in the asset store as well, so bypassing DLC altogether, and then you can buy them individually. When we do DLC, we group things together for great value for you, and we also do that extra testing to make sure that when they do drop into a level, they work with the latest version of GameGuru Max. So that's what we bring to the party. But we're not going to go to town and create 10,000 game-ready assets like we did for GameGuru Classic and FPS Creator before that, and 3D Gamer before that. No one really thanks us for that. We still get roasted on Steam for distracting ourselves when we should really be fixing bugs and adding code and features, which is fair enough. So that's how we're going to play it with GameGuru Max. Third-party artists are going to be the new heroes if you want new characters for your games in the future. But we are going to provide advice and guides on how you can create your own characters if that's what you want to do. If you're an artist or you want to get into 3D modeling and rigging and animating, we're going to give you the advice you need to create your own characters, which actually might be preferred if you're going to get into game making in a big way. Eventually, you're going to want to create your own art, your own assets, and your own characters. Right, question. This is from Jade Birdmax. Could you please replay the AI video game but with sound? It's actually uploaded right now onto the experimental build. So after this broadcast, just update your Steam experimental build, go into the Hub Tutorials tab, Behavior AI, click it, it's right there, and you can just watch it with sound. I was worried actually when I was watching it, because I had the sound, whether you could hear anything, so sorry about that. I thought everyone could hear the sound, and it was a sound of me doing voiceover, so maybe that was a blessing. Okay, question mark from Paul. Paul LeBlanc, is there a best practices PDF or tutorial for creating new GameGuru Max compatible 3D characters and weapons for those of us who want to do that, or has there already missed that? Yeah, just go into the GameGuru Max guides folder, and in fact this was a request from the community, so I added it, and it was a really good idea. Just go into a level, you reach it from here, go into help. We've got a new option here in the help called guides folder, and if you select that, you get this characters, and you also get weapons. So basically those are the two areas where we've just kickstarted advice on that. Those two PDFs are going to get bigger, but that's where we start. And if you've got any more questions after reading those guides, throw them our way, maybe create an issue in the issues board, and we'll expand those guides based on the questions and concerns that we get from people who really genuinely want to create characters and weapons. Other artists have already done it. This isn't new ground, but maybe the advice isn't as crystal clear. And the reason the other artists have managed to get away with it is they asked us lots of questions by email. And rather than do that over and over, I'd rather put them all in guides so everyone benefits. Okay, here's another question from Tom. Does the current behavior editor allow us to change or update the character attack behavior so we make our own improvements to AI? Yes, absolutely it does. I'll tell you why I've shied away from that is I'm not 100% happy. I mean, it works, and I've used it to create all of the AI for all of the people scripts, all the people behaviors. But it's not what you would call 100% super easy user-friendly. It's not quite an internal development tool, but it's not quite, kid gloves. I'll show you how to get at it if you're interested. Now this I'm going to have to sort of distract myself because I reset to defaults whilst I was doing the AI video, and so all of the settings I usually set have now been reset, and you do need to go into advanced if you want access to it. So let me just have a quick look. I think it is here, display AI management in test level. I think that's definitely the one you need. So once you've done that, add a character. So we'll pick a character that does the character attack. So this will be Tony, armed response. Is he an enemy or an ally? He is an enemy, good. And I'll put him over there for now, so he doesn't instantly try and shoot me, because I want to be talking here. Yeah, he's going to shoot me from there, isn't he? You'll see this new option called AI Management. If you click that, and then click Edit Behaviors, and then open that up a little bit, you'll see you've got character attack.lower, and this flowchart style way of arranging the logic. Excuse me a second. I'm just going to stick Tony on that volcano. There you go, Tony. Bugger off. You can still get his script, but he's not going to trigger anything off, find you or shoot you. So you see all of these states. So you can put your character in different states, and for each state, the logic is at a certain position in the state, and it runs through like a series of instructions. Anyone knows anything about programming knows you go from first instruction to the second to the third, which branches to the sixth and seventh, comes back to the first, second and third. You get the idea. If you don't, do a quick course on programming, come back and you'll understand that this is the visual version of programming. But you see how big it is and how spread out it is. It's it's not quite, I think, as good as it could be. It's good, I can get all the logic created, but is it really something that we want to focus people's attention on right after release? Maybe there's something better we can do. But just to answer your question, if I wanted to say add in another action, I can just click this add button, and you've got a choice of all these actions that you can choose from. So maybe you wanted to destroy the character at that point, and then you can do update behavior, which saves that behavior locally in your writables folder, and then you can restart the behavior of that character, and it will start using this logic, including this instruction that you've inserted. I'm going to delete that because I don't want to mess up my scripts. And you can stop the behavior, you just want to freeze the character. And in the AI management, it actually shows you the ID of that object in your level, and this number on the left will match that ID, because it will list every object that's currently actively running script inside your level. And if you've got a lot of objects and a lot of characters, you have to identify them by this number. So you'll scroll down this big list, and then you'll select the one that you're actually interested in, i.e. the character that's just behind the door, and you don't know whether it can see you or not because you want to be able to visualize the logic. And what's cool about this is it actually highlights the instructions as it goes through, so you can see a little wave of color passing through these instruction blocks based on what state they're in and where they are within that state. But this deserves a whole 6 months of tutorials and videos and improvements to the AI, etc. I just wanted to show you where it was, because it is pretty powerful, it's pretty cool. Commands are being added to it all the time, and I do believe at some point it's going to be an extension of the visual logic connections system. So instead of having to drill down into a test level and then go into a particular script, you should be able to sort of lay out your logic the same way you would add objects into your scene and set properties to behaviors. You also get to chain logic blocks together, probably through this access visual logic connections and the logic that gets triggered as a result of it. So I digress. Great question. Sorry if that absolutely bored the pants off everybody else. But it is one of my passions, programming languages, and I just wanted to reveal that's where it is if you are interested. Okay, more questions have been flooding in. We're looking at the clock. We're doing quite well, actually. 30 minus the 3 minutes before the broadcast started. So really, we're technically only 27 minutes. Plenty time for more questions. If you're bored already with listening to my voice, you can leave anytime. Watching it, pick it up again on YouTube. It goes onto YouTube after we finish this broadcast. So let's see if we can find out where we was. We was there. So the next one is here. Peck, could you pin the EXP build code into the Discord somewhere so people can opt in for it? That code is everywhere now. Could someone in the live chat please post it into the message here? It's not secret. And for some reason we added a code. We didn't really need to add the code. Maybe it's just we wanted to sort of focus people's attention that the experimental build is what it says on the tin. It's experimental. We could upload a really bad version which kills your level, and we wanted people just to have a heads up that this is something, the latest version, and we're still working on it. So question from Berlidos. Could we get a demo rig for character parts and weapons which is importable into modeling programs such as Blender and Max so we can start creating our own, please? There is. If you look in the guides folder, in addition to the PDF, which is a lovely little user manual to get you started, we also include, certainly for the characters, a character rig. And I think there is, in progress, worked on right now, a weapons rig. Don't think it's quite ready yet, but we are looking at adding that to the guides folder. So guides folder is, like I said, not only where you're going to find the instructions, but all of the bits and pieces you might need as templates to get you started. And Blender right now is our tool of choice. The reason is it's free, its community is amazing and massive, and they are constantly improving that tool. Oh, and it's free. So Blender is what we're going to start looking at as sort of your go-to place for originating your own geometry, rigs, animations, texturing, and everything in between. So another question from Bilados. I mean a demo bone rig to use as a reference for what bones and what are needed. Yeah, there is already one for the character rig, character bone rig, so you can drag that into Blender, and that's the rig we use with all the correct names. If you use that rig and then export characters with that, the rest of the GameGuru Max engine will understand how that character looks, and you should start having them running around using all of existing people's scripts, because that script and the importing of characters all need that rig for many reasons, not least of which so it knows how to apply all of the animations you want to add subsequent to your original character import. Question from Mobot. I noticed in the last live show it's a show? Okay, cool. Last live show that the storyboard page was filling up. Is there ability to zoom out? No, there isn't an ability to zoom out as far as I know. I'm going to check for you right now. I think there was at one point, but it was a bit interesting when we'd finished it. Yeah, there isn't, is there? We did experiment with like a little slider bar, similar to what you see in, let me show you, the other slider bar, which we already have. You see this? We see all of the, we had a slider bar, you see, and you can change the general size of the thumbnails. And that comes in really handy. Sometimes you want it small thumbnails so you can browse really quick, and sometimes you kind of more interested in the details, so you drill in like that. And so we had, I think, some early version of that working for storyboard. And for some reason, and I don't know why, it's not in this one. Maybe it's an option, who knows. But yeah, if a lot of people want that, I don't think it's a high priority thing. And there may be other reasons why we didn't add it in. Maybe some complexity about grabbing these little gadgets if they're too small, or if it's too large it makes no sense because you're constantly scrolling around. But a great feature request to add to the issues board. I think that would be super useful at some point. Maybe, as I've just mentioned in the object library, you want to kind of zoom out to see the whole thing, and then you want to zoom in when you're detailing, editing, say, your RPG screens or a particular set of levels. Or you want to spread everything out so you've got different sections for different parts of your overall game. So let me know as a feature request in the issues board, but also justify why. What's your case study? Why is that needed over what we've currently got? Okay, another question. This is from Rolf. Is it possible for artists to create parts DLC for Character Creator? Not right now, because there isn't a good guide for that. It's certainly possible. Everything that is used by the Character Creator are already body parts, and you just add to a list of those body parts, give them nice icons and names, and they show up in the Character Creator. But it's all very much done internally right now. There isn't an advice guide on how a third party can bring in character body parts. However, the whole point we created the Character Creator version 2 is we wanted to add that option, so you could add in your own custom stuff from Blender and augment the characters. Maybe you like the characters for the most part, you just want to add a new hat or a backpack or something like that. So it was always intended that we'd have a custom section so you can create your own. But right now, what you see in version 1 is kind of what you're going to get, and watch out for that guide which tells you how to create your Character Creator body parts for the Character Creator, how to create your character from scratch, how to create melee weapons, how to create projectile weapons. That's what the guides will be for. Oh, great. Thanks, Informatica. That is the code for the experimental build on Steam, so just insert that into the beta tab and you're away. This is another question, maybe the last question of the broadcast. What happens if I have GitHub issues assigned to Zach, but he's missing in action? Assign them to me. I'm going to fix all of the ones that were formerly of Zach. I think all of Zach's are now in the mediums. So if your bug is in the medium, you can assign it to me, and if you feel it should be a high, just post a comment. Once it's assigned to me and then you post a comment, I get notified immediately, and I can quickly check it out and see if it should be a high or if it stays as a medium. We're not ignoring mediums, but mediums shouldn't stop the release of the product. Highs and showstoppers and criticals and crashes all do, but mediums are sort of those edge cases where it won't really interfere with the first couple of hours of using the software. And as soon as it's released and as soon as all the highs are gone, we're going to be fixing all the mediums anyway. So it all gets fixed. It's just a question of the order in which they are being fixed. So we are definitely over our half-an-hour mark, which is where I like to end these broadcasts. And with no more questions, I can confidently declare we answered every single question that was asked in this broadcast. Super pleased about that. I will be back next Wednesday at 7 p.m. GMT, so have your questions ready for next week. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you very much for joining me live, and I look forward to revealing more, probably those 30 new behaviours for next Wednesday's broadcast. So until then, thanks very much for attending, and I'll speak to you all next week. Goodbye.